Testing. Yep, that's good. Stop.
Call to order, please. All rise. Flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have a reading of the Sunshine Law, please?
Notice of this meeting was published in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act.
Okay, standard announcement, there will be no new business after 11 p.m. May I have a roll call, please?
Mayor McLaughlin,
Here.
Mr. McKay,
Here.
Mrs. Gilmore. Here. Mr. Tricoci,
Here.
Mrs. Kelly. Here. Mrs. Baggio. Here. Mrs. Shindell. Here. Ms. Costco, absent. Mr. Krollpfeifer,
Here.
Mr. Bradley,
Here.
Mr. Murphy,
Here.
and Mrs. Caguglio, absent.
Okay, do we have a quorum?
Yes.
Okay, items for new business, we have two of them. One, the first case is being continued to the July meeting. That's case 22-05, Fernando and Teresa Lorenco. So I'm going to make a motion to continue it to July 14th, to make special note of the date, July 14th. And they do not have to make any notice because it's already been done and we're continuing. So I need a second.
I second.
Okay, any questions on the motion?
Mr. Krollpfeifer, can we just state that that meeting is a Thursday evening and not a normal Wednesday
Okay,
evening?
yes, I will repeat what Mrs. Tiber just said. It's a Thursday. July 14th. Okay,
I'm sorry.
roll call, please.
Who seconded that?
Trish.
Okay.
Tish. Tish.
Mr. Krollpfeifer,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mr. McKay,
Yes.
Mrs. Gilmore,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Yes.
Mr. Tricoci,
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio,
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall.
Yes.
Okay, the second case, is 19-12A Davenport Village. Mr. Del Duca is representing the applicant.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone. My name is
Welcome
Damian
back.
Del Duca, and I'm an attorney with Del Duca Lewis LLC, the law firm representing the applicant, which is DV Hainesport LLC, and we're here for Hainesport Village tonight, which is a community I'm sure you're familiar with. I have with me James Reynolds, or Jamie Reynolds, who's the executive director of the Diocesan Housing Services Corporation for the Diocese of Camden, and he's here representing the applicant. And I also have Jason Shulo, who's our civil engineer. And both of these gentlemen may be providing testimony this evening. Before we get into the testimony, what I'd like to do is give you a brief overview of the application. It's a fairly straightforward application. Hopefully we can present it efficiently so we don't keep you out too late. The property is known commonly as Davenport Village. It's 301 Davenport Avenue, which abuts Marne Highway. It's block 9.01. Lot 43. I have an aerial photograph that I've marked as Exhibit A1. I'm going to hand out smaller versions of this in a moment.
Give out the drinking.
And that's an aerial of the site, Marne Highway, at the top of the plan here. Davenport Village is an existing community consisting of 56 apartment units that are income restricted for low and moderate income families. And that's shown on this aerial. And then we superimpose onto this aerial that which we propose to add to Davenport Village, which is an additional 2 buildings that will have 8 apartment units each for a total of 16 new apartment units. So it will be an expansion of Davenport Village from 56 units to 72 units. And we're here tonight for final major site plan approval. We were here before you almost 3 years ago, which is hard to believe, but September of 2019, at which time this board granted preliminary major site plan approval for this plan that we're here for tonight again. Tonight, we're returning for final site plan approval. The purpose of final site plan approval, as you know, as a land use board, is to confirm that we've complied with the conditions of preliminary, to make sure that we've made the changes to the plan that were required to be made, complied with conditions of approval that were imposed when you granted preliminary, and to the extent there are any remaining conditions, whether they can be carried forward as conditions of final site plan approval. You adopted a resolution number 2019-09 on October 2nd, 2019, which I have a copy of here tonight. So we're here tonight seeking final approval, and we'll demonstrate to you that we have complied with the conditions of preliminary site plan approval. And I think there's one remaining condition relating to a developer's agreement that will be a condition of final. And we have review letters from your professionals, Taylor Design Group, dated May 23, and Richard Alimo Associates, dated May 26th. And other than a few exceptions, which we'll get into in our testimony, and there are only a few, we have no objection to the comments set forth in those two letters. When we were here in 2019, I know many of you were here, but probably not all of you, we told you then that this community would be financed through low-income housing tax credits, or LIHTC, that are administered by the New Jersey Housing Mortgage Finance Agency, HMFA. And these are very competitive credits. They're awarded based on a fairly involved and complicated awards or point system. And we told you then that we were applying for those tax credit awards, and in order to apply, we needed to have at least preliminary site plan approval, which you granted. The Diocesan Housing Services Corporation did apply and were awarded those tax credits, subject, of course, to coming back, getting final site plan and any other approvals that may be required. So those tax credits were awarded, and they will be used to help fund these new units and make these new units a reality. These additional units that we're applying for tonight are not only a permitted use in the R3 zoning district, which is the zoning district in which this property is located, but they're consistent and provided for in your housing element in your fair share plan. So this is entirely consistent with your plan and will help the township fulfill its obligations to provide its fair share of low and moderate income housing. So that really is an overview of that. That is what we're here for tonight. You have our plans. We're going to have Mr. Shulo testify relating to various details of the plan. He'll give you an overview of the plan just to help refresh your recollection as to what's proposed. It's consistent with what you approved at preliminary. We have the comments of your professionals. We'll address some of those comments in that testimony, and then we'll answer any questions that you may have. So I'll ask Jay to step up. While he's doing that, I'm going to hand out copies of our exhibits. For the record, there are three exhibits. A1, which is the aerial on the board. Exhibit A2, which we'll show you in a moment, is just a zoomed-in version of Exhibit A1. And Exhibit A3 are the architectural renderings that were prepared by Donovan Architects that are shown on the floor there in front of the easel. That's Exhibit A3. When I printed 15 copies, I was sure that I'd have enough, but you have more than 15 people, so I'll just ask that maybe a couple of you share. I apologize for that. You show those? Just pass these around. That would be greatly appreciated. So, Mr. Chairman, we can have both of our witnesses sworn at the same time or one at a time, as you please.
Together would be best.
Okay.
Some time.
Raise your right hand, please. Swear or affirm the testimony you give tonight.
Thank you.
We're going to start with Mr. Shulo. Oh, Jay will share the microphone. Mr. Shulo, can you briefly review your professional background?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Jason Shulo, S-C-I-U-L-L-O, professional engineer, professional planner, licensed in New Jersey. I have a bachelor's of engineering from Stevens Institute of Technology. Been practicing professionally for 22 years, licensed for 17 in engineering and 7 in planning. Specialize in land use and development projects such as this. Been before this board for the preliminary version of this plan and before many other boards in South Jersey.
Are you a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey?
I am.
Is your license in good standing?
It is.
Mr. Chairman, we'd ask the board accept Mr. Shulo as an expert in professional engineering.
I think we will. Just one question. Have you testified before us before?
I have, yes.
That's what I thought. So the answer, any questions from the board members?
No.
If not, definitely accept.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Shulo, did your office prepare the civil drawings that were submitted with this application under your direct supervision?
Yes.
And did you testify at the hearing at which this board granted preliminary?
I did.
Okay. Were you here for my introductory comments?
Yes, sir.
Were they factually accurate?
They were.
Okay, using exhibits A1 and A2 as you please give the board a brief overview of the site and what we propose to change.
So, Damien mentioned in the intro, the site is block 9.01, lot 43 in the R3 zone. This existing development, Davenport Village, the 56 units that exist today were approved in the early 2000s. As you see, there's 7 buildings on the site. Site improvements also include parking areas to service those buildings, driveways, a playground, tennis court, landscaping, lighting, and stormwater management facilities. As part of this application, we were only focused on Davenport Village. When this was originally approved, you see the neighboring development, Franklin Estates, that was all originally part of one application that was in phases. But we are, as I mentioned, focused on this. The importance of that is a lot of the stormwater that actually gets accommodated on our project site comes from other places. That was again developed in the early 2000s. There are no environmental constraints on the site, such as freshwater wetlands or flood hazard areas. What's proposed in this application is identical to what was presented in the preliminary approval process. Underneath this building here that I'm hanging over, which we call it, we're going to get the building numbers messed up, I think the 900 building, there's a tennis court. It's underutilized. It was determined during the design phase that it would be better off replaced with these buildings to help, as Damien mentioned, help the township meet their affordable housing obligation. This proposed development, or this portion of this, is these 2 new buildings, as mentioned, 16 new units. There are 5 one-bedroom units, 10 two-bedroom units, and 1 three-bedroom unit. That mix is compliant with affordable housing controls that are in place in the township and statewide. In addition to these new buildings, as you see, everything that's in color on this plan, or brighter colors, is proposed. Generally, the line here where I'm hanging over at Building 100, as it's called, everything north of that is new development. So we have the parking spaces that are here also, along with a basin expansion of the middle basin, and then regrading around these lots, or the buildings, to make that all work. With that parking that's added, the entire site remains compliant with the New Jersey Residential Site Improvement Standards for parking. So we have no requested relief of any sort. Everything is compliant with the underlying zoning and the state site improvement standards.
Is that true for the entire plan,
It is.
not just relating to parking?
Correct. Yeah.
So we don't require any variances, waivers, or RSIS exceptions?
No, there was one design waiver granted previously, preliminary related to the recreational facilities, which I'll touch on. A couple of checklist items that we're going to go through, but no other design waivers.
Okay. So the design waiver that we required, that was granted.
That was correct.
No new design waivers or exceptions?
No, sir.
No new RSIS de minimis exceptions?
No.
And no variances?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Continue, please.
We also, as you see, we're just connecting to the existing drive, or the existing parking modification to the driveway that comes into the site, so the access is exactly as it is today. It's serviced currently by public water and sewer, will continue to be. These 2 new buildings will connect internally in this driveway. There's water and sewer, will be connecting to that. As part of the overall site development, there are also renovations proposed to the existing units, which isn't subject to site plan approval, part of the overall project. We're also going to be upgrading the light fixtures on site to be energy efficient LED fixtures, which is part of the reason the tax credits were chased. For the recreational facilities, that was the design waiver that we received during preliminary. So pursuant to your ordinance, there was a requirement to have a top lot, a basketball court, and tennis court. As we testified during the initial preliminary hearing, the tennis court that's on site, as I mentioned, was underutilized, is underutilized. The top lot will remain, and the playground will remain and take place at the top lot. And what we proposed as part of this application, it's hard to see from there, but we're showing a basketball half court painted on the section of driveway here that's on the, I won't call it a dead end, but it's just circulation. There's no building on it, no parking, it's just a driveway. So this basketball court makes sense to put there, and it's already paved, we can paint it in, it fits. So as agreed to and testified to during the preliminary hearing, that's the basketball court location that's proposed. The top lot playground will be upgraded with more current equipment. The play surface will be upgraded. We don't have those details on the plan as of now, they're still being worked out. So respectfully request this condition of approval to provide that information once we have it known. For the submission waivers, just to touch on them, there are 5, and these are carryover from the original submission, I'm sorry, the preliminary approval submission. They are traffic study, environmental impact statement, all-site drainage features within 500 feet of the site, all-site building structures, rights-of-way, signs, lights, and paving within 100 feet of the site, and percolation tests and soil logs. So for the first 4 I mentioned, we're definitely going to be respectfully requesting relief for providing because the traffic study is not warranted because again, it's a minor increase in the amount of trips generated at the site. Secondarily, it's on the Warren Highway, which is under county jurisdiction. We have a separate application filed with the county under review right now. We also request relief from providing an environmental impact study since the site is fully developed. Also drainage features and off-site buildings, again, since we're not impacting those features in any form, we again respectfully request relief. Percolation tests and soil logs, although we're not going to provide exactly what the ordinance requests. After speaking with Mr. Miller, which I'll get into a little more detail, we are going to provide some soil testing related to stormwater management. I don't really have anything else related.
Yeah,
to
so-
myself,
No, yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Jay. So when the board granted preliminary site plan approval, it adopted the resolution that I had identified, and there were several conditions stated in that resolution. 3 in particular, and I just want to address those briefly. And these are on page 4 of Resolution 2019-09. The first one is that the applicant has agreed to consider the possibility of construction of either basketball court or tennis court as an on-site amenity, and you've addressed that with a half-court basketball, correct? That first condition also states that the existing playground facility will be upgraded, and we're doing that, correct?
We are.
Okay. And we're providing, if we haven't, we will provide the details of the upgrades on the revised plans?
Yes.
All right. Condition number 2 on page 4 of the resolution states that one of the 2 new buildings will contain approximately 1,600 additional square feet to accommodate leasing and social service offices, community meeting space, and maintenance facilities. And is it correct that we are still showing that on our architectural plans?
We are.
The third condition is that the applicant will enter into a development agreement with the township to comply with the affordable housing obligations, which will be subject to the review and approval of the board attorney and planner. And is it correct that we ask the board to carry that condition forward as a condition of final site plan approval?
Yes.
Okay.
Respectfully request that to the conditions.
Okay, there were a few comments that I wanted to address in the review letters. First, in Mr. Taylor's letter dated May 23rd, and this won't take too long, everyone.
Counselor, before we move
Yeah.
into, while you have your witness here, can you just show us, I think it's, was it building 900, where the community center or the office is going to be, that the one that?
It's going to be on the southern end of the building closest to Davenport.
Okay, and explain again what you said that light green area is that's down below that. Is that an expansion?
Here,
Yeah,
that's going to be expansion of that existing stormwater management system.
okay. All right, and another question I have on this recreational. Can you show me exactly where you're talking about this half a basketball court?
In the middle of this driveway that runs generally north-south, south of that basin, there's open space to fit that basketball court on the existing pavement,
On the pavement?
on the pavement.
So you're going to have basketball being played where cars are going to drive through?
Generally, it's low intensity, there's no one really using that driveway.
No, but with all due respect, it only takes one, no matter how intense it is. It just takes one situation with a couple of people playing over there. Do you have any idea what the young kids population is in this village?
I don't.
Is it nominal or none? or-
Mr. Reynolds may be the better person to answer that, unless you can answer it, Mr. Shula.
Okay.
Yeah, we have I don't have the statistics right off the top of my head, but there's a range in age of kids, from young kids all the way up to, high school age. But again, I think our thinking was, this is at the very end of the loop. The only people who have cause to drive back here are people basically who live in this building. Anyone else is going to park. There's really no reason to come around it at all, because there's circulation directly to all the parking spots, if you look at it. So it's only if you were parking in these basically last 4 spots that you even have cause to think about taking that. And so, our thinking was, hey, that's a really good spot to be able to accommodate the basketball.
But it's also, I'm not trying to argue with you, but I guess in a way I am. You have delivery vehicles that could go down there too, right?
Again, I think the likelihood of, again, you're talking about the likely use hours of this are, 3 to 6 p.m. in the afternoon after school, and then on the weekend. And so, again, I think relatively speaking, it's worth the risk to have the amenity there. And we could certainly, and one of the things we could explore with fire marshal is just putting a gate across there to, so that fire vehicles could go through it. Because I think that's the only reason why it exists, right?
Yeah.
Is for fire truck circulation. So if you wanted us to, we'd certainly chat with the fire marshal and explore whether we could close it off with a gate that they'd have to keep. And that would then,
Okay. Thank you.
That's a big deal at all. It might solve your problem.
Okay, One last on this subject. Mail delivery, where does the mail, do you have
So
a,
mail currently, all the boxes are right here, getting right there. And so we're going to talk with, part of I think the approval was that we would, confer with the postmaster and figure out whether we'd be adding to that gang box there, or whether we create one
Okay.
closer to the new units.
Okay.
And we're going to be subject to the
all
postmaster.
right, I mean, the only point I was getting at is that mail delivery is not going to be with this basketball.
No.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Could we make the condition of approval that there is a gate installed to prevent traffic other than the fire marshal?
Subject to the fire marshal approving it. I think we're fine with that.
Okay.
All right.
So I'll just continue on. Well, the next question was going to be how mail was handled, so we took care of that. So comment number 6 on page 3, it's actually comment D6 of Taylor Design Group's letter, relates to a comment proposing or stating that the applicant proposes a wood board-on-board fence trash enclosure, and they suggest a durable masonry enclosure, et cetera. Can you address that comment, Jay, please?
Yeah, the last sentence in that comment is at a minimum, we suggest that a solid vinyl fence be utilized for durability and to keep debris from blowing outside of the enclosure. We agree, we will agree to provide a vinyl fence in lieu of the wooden fence if that's what the planner desires. We want to try to get away from doing a masonry enclosure for a couple reasons, mostly cost, because this is an affordable housing project funded by public credits. It's difficult to fit everything you want into the project, and that, based on, aside from being affordable, they're really not visible from outside the site. The existing condition has dumpsters sitting on pads with no enclosure, so whatever we do will be an improvement. We respectfully request to use vinyl as suggested.
Okay. The next comment I want to address, unless the board wants to handle these one by one, I'll just keep going unless you ask me to stop, is comment E1 in the Taylor letter, which asks for some details relating to the building features. We have Exhibit A3, which are the elevations that I identified previously. Can you address that comment, Mr. Shula?
This exhibit was prepared by the project architect. In the upper right corner is a photo of one of the existing buildings on site, and the rendering on the bottom of the sheet is what's proposed. You can see it's similar in style. The main difference, the existing buildings have a vertical brick face for a portion of it, and what's proposed now is a water table that runs the entire length of the building, along with some architectural fenestration related to relief in the front facade, changes in siding. So it'll have horizontal lap siding that's similar color to existing, and runs for the majority of it. It'll have white panels, kind of sunk in different places, white columns, white windows, and asphalt shingles to match the existing on site. So the intent is to generally make it look like the other buildings that are there.
Okay.
Could I interrupt you?
Sure.
Where are you planning on the light fixtures on that building, or are you planning light fixtures on that building?
There'll be light fixtures required by building code for the access points, but there's no larger structures for downlighting the parking or anything.
Attached to the building?
Yeah, absolutely. There are side lights, but no.
And the location of those building-mounted lights are dictated by code?
Yeah, they're at the doors.
Okay. Comment number F8 on the final page of the Taylor letter.
Could you back up?
Over E2.
Oh, did I?
Rooftop equipment, just want to confirm that it is none proposed.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Can we do E3 before we jump into the next one?
Sure. So,
And it's on the subject of Mrs. Kelly's question relative to building lighting. Mr. Taylor has says that it's inadequate in front of building 900. Are you aware of that?
so we received that comment, Mr. Chairman, and we're going to comply with all the comments other than as clarified during testimony. So our intent was to comply with that by, as he requests, show those details on the plans, make sure that they're adequate.
Good, thank you.
My pleasure. Comment F8 asks us to provide testimony regarding irrigation and suggesting a system be considered to ensure the establishment and long-term health of the plantings. Can you please address that? Why don't we go to the site plan?
So the existing condition, hopefully everyone's had a chance to go by the site. It's a mature vegetation, it's in pretty good shape, it's maintained well, there's no irrigation system on site now. So we intended for similar treatment in the proposed conditions and also similar maintenance and upkeep so that we wouldn't need an irrigation system. Contractor will be responsible to make sure that all the plants survive through the construction period and for at least a year after. We will, as the owner and applicant, maintain the vegetation such that we don't need an irrigation system. So we respectfully request them not have that suggestion imposed on the project.
On a related topic, Mr. Taylor asked us to consider sodding the site, particularly the frontage. Can you address that, please?
Yeah, so we would love to use sod if the budget will allow it, but we don't want to be writing into a condition to use it. We will consider it if the budget allows, no doubt. But what we want to make sure is clear is it's very likely going to be seeded in accordance with the soil erosion standards, as most every project is.
In which area will the applicant consider sodding, so we're clear?
I think Mr. Taylor means along the section that's close to the driveway through here, on
Okay.
the west side of that first building.
Okay. Unless I missed any comments in the Taylor Design Group letter that you want to address, I'll move to the Alimo letter dated May 26th. You've addressed the request relating to the submission waivers. So the comments which begin on page 3 and continue on to page 4 of the letter relating to drainage and stormwater, I'm just going to ask you to address those, in the entirety, so that we don't get too technical on stormwater issues. But I want to make sure we address the comments.
So I'll start by saying that Mr. Miller's office did a very good thorough review. We had multiple conversations this morning about the comments and how to address the overall condition of the site. So in general, it's an interesting situation in that the regulatory standards really can't be written around a project such as this, which is generally expansion of an existing facility. To make it a little more difficult, the existing facility was approved prior to any current standard being in place. The stormwater rules at the time this was approved very different than what we have today for sure, and what we also had in 2019 when the preliminary approval was granted, which is the standard by which we would be for new construction held to. In the end, when we had our conversations, as you'll see on this aerial photo, the 3 basins on site here, they look like they have standing water in them. Not really sure maintenance practices that went on, if any, in the beginning of the project. The current owner was not the owner at the time that it was done. There was a third-party management company, and we learned that may or may not have done what they needed to do. So as part of this project, and through conversation with Mr. Miller, what we want to do, and the overarching goal of this review and of our project now, is to correct these conditions such as these basins no longer hold water and function properly. As I mentioned, the rules can't be written around this project, and the current rules don't really apply to this, so we won't be able to, and it's not really appropriate, to bring these basins that were built 20 years ago into compliance with current standards. What we can do, though, is get them as close to that as possible and make them functional. as they were originally designed. So that's what we have generally agreed to, and we will provide all the information necessary in Mr. Miller's office to demonstrate that intent. And then obviously during construction.
I'd like to clarify that, especially for purposes of the resolution, to make sure we get this straight. Is it correct that we would agree to a condition of approval that will evaluate the condition of the existing basins and attempt to remediate them so that we reduce or hopefully eliminate standing water? Okay.
And part of that, as mentioned in Mr. Miller's letter, is going to be some soil testing to evaluate existing conditions. It's very likely that some of these basins have some sedimentation that have generally clogged them so that they don't function properly. We're going to have to evaluate that. That's going to be part of the process as well.
And the goal being to get these basins closer to the point where they infiltrate as originally intended, correct? Okay. Were there any other comments in the Alimo letter that you wanted to clarify, touch upon, or not comply with?
I believe that's it.
Okay.
The one basin is to be expanded, if I'm reading the
Yes.
shading correctly.
Yeah, this middle basin here. Correct.
So is that expansion going to be in conformity with the old standard? Or are you going to upgrade that to the current standard?
The expanded area will be in compliance with the rules in place in 2019 when we were granted preliminary approval.
19, okay. As were the other basins, they're constructed to 2019 rules as well.
No, they were built in 2003.
2003,
Yeah,
okay,
2002, 2003. Yeah.
all right.
And one thing to note just on this that I think Jay pointed out earlier that is worth mentioning is that when Franklin Estates was developed, the developer, Franklin Estates, also then arranged for the affordable piece to be done. And so so we accommodate almost all the runoff from Franklin Estates. So the notion that, if we were to bring these up to 2019 standards, it's not just to accommodate this site, but would be to accommodate all the runoff from the neighboring neighborhood. Not really possible, based on, on current state. So just, something to keep in mind that we kind of have taken on and are responsible for the maintenance of basins for runoff that we don't even create. And so that was just kind of a condition of the original deal. And I don't think anyone was paying attention at the time, but the affordable piece, kind of bears the burden of all the runoff maintenance, so.
Right. But is there, just out of curiosity, is there an emergency overflow arrangement for these basins? Should the unthinkable actually occur?
So when the design was done in 1998, and started and revised for 2001, from what we can gather, these, generally they're chained together. This basin in the rear takes some runoff from off-site, captures it before it gets through the site. That's connected to the middle basin, which then is connected to the basin closest to Martin Highway. Everything's draining towards Martin Highway. There is a control structure in this basin and also one in this basin, but there doesn't appear to be an emergency overflow, like a spillway that will just dump it into the river. But the structure is set up such that the storm events that were evaluated in back at that time, in 1998 to 2000, that nothing left the site. The standards, as I mentioned, have changed, so now the rainfall depths back then are very different than what we have now, so now there's more runoff, we have to model through this. So there is going to be discharge, but there is no overland emergency spillway, it's all accommodated through that structure.
I'd like to comment on that, is that when we had several pretty good rainfalls, one 8-inch rainfall, and I went around to most of our detention basins in the town to see if there was any problem. I didn't see any problem with this.
Good. Thank you.
I thought I was the only one that did goofy stuff like that.
Okay.
We had one in August of 97 that dropped 12.5 inches in Atlantic County, and I remember driving around with friends of mine, and we were in school looking at stuff, and like, I don't know how this stuff survived, but it did. Pretty wild.
So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes our planned testimony. Obviously, we'll answer any questions that we can.
Okay. Any questions from the board members? Front row first. Hearing none. Professionals, any other questions?
I think we're pretty good here, so I'm satisfied.
For D1, testimony providing confirming affordability controls. From the market.
I think Mr. Shula will address that, and Mr. Reynolds can answer any unanswered questions in that comment.
Yeah, so you're talking about the developer agreement?
Well, that's the next line item, but there's testimony providing affordability controls.
Yeah, so this is currently an income restricted project through the low income housing tax credit program, which originally financed it. The affordability controls are still in place for another 10 years under the original approvals. Under the, as we go through and rehabilitate, so we're not only building these, we're rehabilitating all the existing units. So they'll all be brought up to speed. And then the affordability restrictions will be in place for another 30 years. So that's a good thing, and will help ultimately when the township, as the township goes to, comply with its round 3 obligations.
Are you doing the rehabilitation as the apartments turn over, or?
No, we're gonna do it, so we'll basically, our phasing plan right now, before COVID, we thought we might do an in-place rehab, and actually work around with residents in their units as we were, rehabilitating units. With COVID, we decided, let's rethink that, and so we're gonna build these 2 first, and then we'll relocate basically on a building by building basis and hopscotch the residents around. So it's a little bit of a logistical challenge, but it'll allow us to basically, go into each building once it's vacant and, attack it, kind of fully without having to work around the residents.
New kitchens, new bathrooms, that sort of
So
thing?
yeah, so we're going to be doing, we're going to re-roof the whole thing, new windows, and then new kitchen countertops, new appliances, new flooring in all the units, painting, some bathroom improvements, and I'm trying to think whether that's sort of the major parts. So, and then we've replaced a bunch of the HVAC units in recent years, but to the extent that there are units that have not had upgrades to their HVAC, we'll also do that. Same thing with hot water heaters to the extent that they haven't been replaced.
Does each unit have their own washing bill?
They do. They do have their own washers and dryers, every unit.
So I wasn't here in 19, I don't think, when the preliminary came in. But I'd heard some talk about, is Joe and his group taking over management of this?
No.
Is that what's going on?
No, the Housing Services Corporation of the Camden Diocese. So we're the Diocesan Housing Services Corporation. We have a portfolio of about 1,000 units that we manage throughout South Jersey. It includes this.
I see Joe's included on some of the.
Yeah, so Walters is our partner on this, and they have, they're the builder. So they're our contractor, and then they're also our development partner on it. But they don't have a long-term ownership interest in the project.
Okay. I have a question that kind of involves tailored design, but you're involved in it. I spoke to Mr. Taylor today, and just for the benefit of other folks, one of the reasons he's not here tonight is he's getting over COVID. So I said, good, stay home. But he mentioned something about a conversation, I don't know who it was with you folks, but about putting this half basketball thing around or behind building 200?
It wasn't with me.
It might have been somebody that wasn't here tonight, maybe it was someone from the Walters Group, I don't know, but I'm not familiar with
Okay,
it.
well, what I wanted to suggest to speed things up and not
Yeah.
drag them out is that, could you mention to Scott Taylor the conversation we had relative to the blocking of that driveway?
Yeah,
'Cause-
we discussed that because we did see it on the plan today when we were looking. We had concerns about safety. Honestly, I don't know how we would ever be comfortable with that. But if, I'd be surprised if the fire marshal would be willing to gate that as well, to be honest, but.
Well, I just want to have everybody talk about it, so you don't have to come back
Well,
here.
again, I mean, the gating, I think, is probably pretty low hanging fruit. I mean, there are all kinds of projects that I'm sure you've been involved in where you have emergency egress or ingress that is a gated, structure, and the fire department either has the key or blows right over.
Right. It's usually not as part of, I mean, this is a pretty clearly defined circulation kind of route. So, I want to be realistic. I don't think that would really fly, but,
All right, well, then maybe you could have him reinitiate, or not initiate, continue the conversation about behind building 200.
Yeah, have you guys looked at that space between building 200 and 300?
One of the things that we were concerned with, and I want to just, I know that the voice Sandy probably is sitting down. When we grew up around here, we had them in the streets like this, and everybody.
I agree.
Yeah, go on, no, yeah.
One of the things that I was concerned with is noise. So if we put it directly adjacent to any of these buildings, it's going to be lit, it's going to be loud, there's going to be people playing. That location is pretty much as far from every building as we can get. So we had residents in mind as well, because we think it's going to be probably lightly used and only in the hours that Jamie mentioned, off hours, off peak compared to traffic circulation or deliveries or hopefully any kind of fire apparatus needing to go through. So yeah, we did. It's not like we there's always considerations that we have to find the house, competing needs. And this is what we felt was the best location based on that.
Could I ask, where do they play basketball right now?
Here.
The kids that live in Davenport, they come here to play.
Yeah, that's the closest.
Yeah.
Recreation.
It's only, it's half a mile down the street. So yeah, that's why this tennis court never gets used.
Okay. Wait, so the tennis court never gets
We're
used?
losing this.
We're losing, yeah, there's an existing tennis court that's been there
So
since.
it'll be under.
Yeah, they're up
for
front.
those buildings.
So this little square that I'm seeing, that's what the tennis court is?
No, the tennis court is
Right here?
actually, no, that's the top lot for playground.
Tennis
The
court
tennis
Oh.
court is
right here, right
actually
now.
Underneath the footprint.
And there is
I
And then
there's never anybody there.
Yeah, and that's what the other building is going for?
Correct.
Okay. They don't go to the church to play basketball?
They may, but we don't know of that. We know for sure that they come over here.
Where's our basketball hoop here?
What's that?
Where's our basketball hoop
It's
here?
not.
Oh.
Well, not for the planning.
Not specifically.
They don't, we don't know that they play basketball right now. When they do anything recreational.
Oh.
A little bit in that field, and most of them come over here.
Okay, so there's no, like, the standalone, like what you were talking about, like the kids playing the street, they don't, no
Oh,
one,
no, there's
no
no,
one.
there's no courts or, nobody has bought a hoop and
That's what I
put it
mean.
up in their parking spot or anything like that. No, there's currently no basketball on site. So we
Yeah.
examined the site and thought that was really a good spot because there are no parking spaces.
Yes.
And so it is just circulation. So again, I think we could probably talk to the fire marshal and figure out like a breakaway gate that literally they could run the truck over if they had to. Call it a day. But it'll keep, regular traffic.
Or in the alternative, they could just come the other way.
Well, sure, but again, if the concern is they want to have access to that circulation, we can certainly, put a gate that will dissuade most drivers from going through it, but, fire trucks go right over it if it had to.
Just help me, maybe the map I'm looking at has got me confused, but why would a fire truck want to come down there in the first place? Just make a turn.
Just only if they needed to access like that end of the building, but they could come straight in front of us.
Like a bunch of trees.
They could just come straight, they're better off just coming straight down.
It's the same turning radius if you look at it, either way for them, so. Again, I agree with you. I mean, again, we could double gate it if they permit it.
Mayor,
An
sorry,
idea.
Yeah,
Sorry.
What were the other,
where are you talking about with this gate?
So where Jamie was mentioning the driveway that is in the back here that has no parking on it, potentially gating either side of that to be able to.
Here or here.
here.
No,
No, that's the top.
Yeah, I know.
We're talking about this driveway here.
yeah, I know, the gate would be here,
Probably would.
right? The gate would be
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
Yeah.
Here, so that's just, again, there's no parking space like that, right? And so if we put the basketball court there and the hoop right here, they can play, no problem. And again, if the concern is, well, the car can come back there, we would just simply gate that off, and that way, the car's going to be forced to circulate that way.
So, Mrs. Stiver, do we have anybody online? Okay. Okay, good. I'm going to open this public comment.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
I just had a couple other things.
Oh, I'm
I wanted
sorry.
to get into testimony, I'm sorry. There will be a developer's agreement put in place?
Yep.
With the township?
Yes, that'll be a condition of the file.
And I'll watch them. On the colors for the building, the intent is to match the existing, is that the?
Yeah, and there is, at the moment, we're trying to figure out whether we have the budget to resign the existing building.
Oh, okay.
And so the final color will be a function of, do we need to match the existing, or are we
We're
going
gonna
to have
wholesale.
all new all around? And so that's going to be sort of the game time call.
Okay.
But the intention is to either be, at a minimum, to match the existing.
When those colors are selected, we'd have an opportunity to chime in on that, or no?
I would prefer that the conditions say that the color of the new building will be, consistent with the existing building, whether it's replaced or not.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, again,
It's pretty hard to match 20-year-old siding.
Yeah,
because
but I think the intent is
it's all
that they're going to be consistent, so they don't.
The idea is that
Correct.
it looks like a single development.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's the intent, and we would be happy with a condition that says that.
And then the item of E3 about the lighting, it looks like moving that one light pole would get us lighting in front of 900, okay.
Yep.
So we could,
We're working with the lighting rep to get that figured out.
okay. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
And while we're talking about lighting, it's going down, correctly? Correct.
Yep, all the modern fixtures are.
Correct, the LED or downward lit, that's what we'll
And,
have.
and I forget the exact terms that Mr. Taylor used, you'll go with him for
It's all no sky compliant,
what.
for the standards now.
Okay, we're going to open the public comment, and somebody is online, you said, Mrs. Stiver?
Yes, one person.
Want to ascertain, do you have any questions or comments? Do you hear me?
Anybody online that would like to make a comment, please unmute yourself. She's unmuted. Go ahead, ma'am.
No comment, thanks.
Thank you. And no comments in the audience, because there's no audience. So we'll close public comment. Anyone on the board have anything to add before we see what kind of action we want to take? And, no, I have one. We have a letter that comes up, you probably don't have it, but, well, you do have it because it was addressed to you, from Burlington County Public Works Planning Board, that they found your application was deficient and had to do with drainage and so forth. Has that been resolved, or is it still an open
The
issue?
only letter that we received from them asked for additional plan copies. We didn't say anything about drainage deficiency.
Well, we can always include, if we're going to move forward, if you'd like to see this letter.
No, there's no question that we would need to obtain all necessary outside
Right,
agency
okay, that's what I was
approvals.
gonna say.
And as the land use law provides, that would be a condition of any approval. We understand that.
Okay, all right, just wanted to, it's only coincidental that it just came up in our package for tonight, accepting correspondence.
The last thing we saw from them, they asked for an extension of review time, so that's,
Okay.
we'll get it out.
All right. So, board members, what's your pleasure?
We're seeking final site plan approval with the waivers that they have requested as outlined in the engineer's letter. And it would be, if you grant it, it would be subject to compliance with the engineer's letter and the planner's letter. And the gate if it's allowed, to isolate the vestibule for hearing.
I would just ask to clarify that the board consider a motion that will comply with the review letters other than as testified, which are still only a couple of clarifications relating to irrigation, landscaping, whatever other ones there may be, but there are only a few.
Yeah, I've got those.
Okay.
Got the five, the traffic study, the environmental impact, the drainage work tests. I missed the fifth one.
So the waivers, yeah. In Marty's letters, the submission waivers were a traffic study, environmental impact statement, location on site and 500 feet from the site of ponds, streams, drainage ditches and water courses, all building structures, et cetera, within 100 feet of the site, and percolation tests and soil logs.
Yes.
And Mr. Miller said in his letter they have no objection to any of them, right? Mr. Miller? You have no objection to waiving those?
No objection.
So there's two things, though, that are still, I think, loose ends. And that is your request to dispense with the irrigation and the sod.
Yes, and
In lieu of the plants will survive because they're tended to well, and seed instead of sod.
correct. And just to clarify too, they were suggestions, they're not ordinance requirements, so we just respectfully request that we just mention.
Right, these were Taylor suggestions.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, just as one member, I don't have a problem with either of those requests.
Oh, and the other condition, Mr. Kingsbury, would be the same condition relating to the developer's agreement that's in the prior resolution.
Correct.
Right.
And there are certain conditions that were in the preliminary approval which stay in effect.
Just to clarify, Mr. Del Duca, what we're talking about, turn to page 5 of the Alamo letter. I think it's any action we're going to take is going to incorporate that it's subject to the approval of the 4 entities, if you will, and then the catch-all, all agencies having jurisdiction.
Yes, that's correct. I do note that the fire official has approved it, but
Yes.
that was before we talked about a gate, so we'll address that.
We have the letter here.
Correct.
But, so the ones A through E will be incorporated in our motion. Right, Mr. Kingsbury?
B through E. A is the board planner, which we've obviously already addressed in their comments. At comment 35.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at, right.
So the outside agency or other approvals that would be required would be B through E, which is fire official, county planning board, county soil conservation district, and any other agencies having jurisdiction.
Right. Mr. Kingsbury, you're okay with that, incorporating that?
Yes, well, those items would apply whether they were deleted in the resolution or not, but I will put them in.
Okay. Okay, so we need a motion and a second for what action the board would like to take.
Mr. Chairman, do we have a consensus on we have a consensus on everything else I'm hearing, but not necessarily yet on the irrigation and the sod issues. If we just generalize to the planner's report, that would include those, and we're trying to accept them. Yes, no?
Yes, well, as mentioned,
Yeah.
Damien described anything that was modified during testimony aside, we agree to address the condition.
Right. So we would ask the board to consider a motion to approve final major site plan approval with the submission waivers that have been requested, subject to the conditions that were just articulated, including that we comply with the professionals' letters, other than the recommendation to install irrigation and sod on the site. and to put a vinyl fence around the trash enclosure. And I believe that is everything.
Yeah, tot lot finalization, gated basketball court or other fire marshal approved protection. I'm just looking over my list.
What's the plan if the fire marshal comes back and says that they can't put a gate? I mean, I'm okay with no gate personally, so, I mean, if the fire marshal comes back and says no, then what?
I don't think you need a gate. I think that,
I don't either. It's not my vote, but I agree with you.
Yeah, just
He won't sign off on the application unless he approves it, so that leaves them in a bad spot. They'll probably just do what he says.
We're willing to ask him or her, he or she, him or her, if they'll approve the gate, but if they don't, we would like it to be approved as submitted. Of course, the board can consider that or other options.
I would say frame it in terms of approval of a gate or other acceptable safety precautions to protect the.
Yeah, and we're more than willing to engage in a dialogue with the fire marshal. If he has other ideas.
Yeah,
Hey,
you could use speed bumps, you could use
Exactly.
painted lines.
Yeah.
That's right. If he said put a speed bump in lieu of a gate, great.
Agreed.
I mean, it's just kind of I don't want to say a rhetorical question, but just for all of us to think about. How is this any different than in the neighborhoods around town where they have the basketball courts, basketball,
It's not, except you just.
and they even have, we even have some where they've marked the basketball court on the
I think
street.
George is more aware of today's standards than any of us, so I would defer it to him, you know. And he's got to sign off on the application anyway.
Right. So the condition would be that we'll consult with the fire official and install gates or other safety measures that are agreeable to the fire marshal, the fire official, and the applicant.
Okay, good.
All right, I'll move the motion to approve final with the conditions that have been outlined for the last hour or so.
I'll second.
Okay, any questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall?
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Bradley?
Yes.
Mr. Tricoci?
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly?
yes,
Mrs. Baggio?
Yes.
And Mr. Colpiper?
Yes.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate your time and your
Thank you for
consideration.
the
Thank you.
presentation.
Good luck.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Good night, everybody.
Last question, it's been 3 years since
You
you
can have that.
got preliminary, you're waiting 3 years for construction?
So, no. So the third time was the charm. We actually we applied 3 different times for the tax credits. So every year we've gone back at it, and third time was the charm. The first 2 years we got knocked out of the box, very competitive process.
Right, so you expect to
I can
build,
use that.
So, no, we're gonna,
Within the
now
year?
that we have site plan approval, we expect to break ground late summer, maybe September 1st, at the latest. Great.
Quick question, just nothing to do, not something to do. You're gonna stage, as you empty a building, stage it into a new building, will those people go back to their original building?
No, we're not gonna do 2 moves. So the idea is, and again, there may be some exceptions, and some,
They'll be happy to move there.
negotiation that goes on to make people happy, but generally speaking, we'll try
Is there
to
gonna be a lottery on who gets to go
move a building at a
first?
time.
Who gets to go first?
Yeah. Maybe a little arm wrestling over that. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, good night. Okay, moving on. We have the minutes of the meeting of May 4th. Need a motion, a second, that we accept them and include them into our files.
A motion, we accept the minutes of the May 4th meeting as presented.
Second.
Any questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Baggio?
Yes.
Mrs. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Bradley?
Yes.
Mr. Colpiper?
Yes. Resolutions, we have none. Correspondence. Need a motion that be accepted.
Make a motion, we accept and file the correspondence.
The letter.
Okay, do we have a second?
Somebody's ringing.
I'll second.
Okay, any questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mr. McKay,
Yes.
Mrs. Gilmore,
Yes.
Mr. Bradley,
Yes.
Mr. Tricocci,
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio,
Yes. Yes.
Mrs. Tyndale,
Yes.
and Mr. Culpepper.
Yes. Professional comments? Mrs. Newcomb?
Just want to let everyone know that next week, I will be here 20 years.
Wow.
And I would like to say it's been a pleasure working with you all and look forward to another couple of years.
I thought you were gonna say, and I'm gonna retire.
Well, that's a few years down the road, yes.
Yeah, that's a.
It doesn't seem like 20 years to me, that's for sure.
Good. Well, we've enjoyed it. Thank you. Any board comments? None?
No board comments. We have
No.
an odd day for our next meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Everybody, please make note of that.
I'll make a comment. I received a letter from a resident wanting to serve on the planning board. I'm gonna float it to the committee, so we may have a new member next meeting.
Great. That counters the resignation that we have. We had a resignation from the board too.
Oh, who was that?
Caniglia,
Oh, good, she never showed.
So we have one open, and we may have two then.
too, yeah.
So I had somebody ask if be considered
They would go on as an alternate.
as an alternate, yeah.
Yep.
She was.
Any comments from the public, in-house or on the phone? Notice I didn't say outhouse.
Anyone online have public comment?
I appreciate you changing the meeting so it's not on my birthday.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're at number 13, adjournment.
We can give you
Everybody
off.
jumps on this. Need a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Uh,
Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Oh, that's.
I thought the diocese was giving it all. I get the package tour over there. This is two other staff.
Actually, forgetting some of the off my head.
They have